The emergence of COVID-19 has forced the legal industry to rapidly undergo a fundamental transformation. I'm Jack Newton, CEO and co-founder of Clio, the world's leading cloud-based legal software provider. In each episode of Daily Matters, we'll explore what this new normal means for law firms, how legal professionals can find success while working remotely, and how lawyers can best serve their clients during this unprecedented situation. Today's guest is Allison Wolf, one of the foremost lawyer coaches in the country. Allison, it's an important time to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, Jack, it's great to be here. I'm thrilled. This is fun.
I look forward to our conversation. Allison, first and foremost, how are you and your family doing?
Oh, thank you for asking. We're doing great. It's a difficult time. I have family in New York, and I have a cousin who's very close to me, and he works in the for the transit. And so you can imagine I've been thinking a lot about him. And most fortunately, he had a bit of a scare, but was tested and is negative, and is safe. So that was a huge relief. So we're all doing well.
And maybe an extension of that question, what do you find to be on your mind most right now, Allison?
Definitely, it's helping my clients. I have my clients a lot in my head during the day. And a lot of people are going through a lot of different kinds of things right now. I mean, I think that the one thing we can say is everybody's experiencing heightened levels of stress and uncertainty. But the form of the challenges and the way that it's showing up in people's lives and the kind of challenges people are facing are different, really different. And there's a lot of different things going on. So I'm thinking about them. And when I'm not thinking about my clients, I'm thinking about how can I kind of keep my own balance so that I can show up every day, right?
Right. Allison, you have extensive experience coaching lawyers to be more effective leaders. I wonder if you can answer two questions for me. For those of you that don't know, what is a lawyer coach? What's a coach in general? And in your mind, what does effective leadership look like in the midst of a crisis?
I know that ICF has a definition on their website, which goes something like, let me remember it. Coaching is a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires clients to maximize their personal and professional potential. For me, I really think about clients and my work as partnering with lawyers to really help them increase their self-awareness, to expand their outlook, to confront barriers, maximize opportunities, and I think more than anything to create a lasting transformation. And so that's a whole big mouthful of a lot of things. So what does that look like in practice? In practice, it's coaching lawyers who are hitting productivity challenges, such as being sort of caught in firefighting mode day in and day out. It can also be about helping associates in the pre-partnership years with doing what they need to do and what they want to do to attain partnership, if that's one of their goals. Or they may be even wondering if partnership is a goal. In that way, too, coaching can be helping lawyers on kind of career decisions they need to make and career transitions. And certainly a big part of coaching is business development coaching, which is helping lawyers grow thriving practices with more profitable and interesting and fulfilling work. However you look at it, it really is about helping a lawyer get from this is a goal, this is something I want to make happen, to making it happen. It's about that journey. And I'd say the difference with counseling is really focused a little bit on mental health. And sometimes I think in counseling, there might be a look backwards at the past. I think in coaching, we're really forward focused from this moment onwards, right? And we're focused on what do I want to make happen and how am I going to get there? I think that in a nutshell is what coaching is all about.
Can you just tell us a little bit about how coaches typically work with clients, just for anyone that's, I'm sure many of our listeners have never worked with a coach, maybe didn't even know this concept of coach in the form that you're describing exists. It's a bit of a concept that I think has really found its stride in the last handful of years, and we're seeing it talked about a lot more. Tell us what it looks like. How often do you meet? What kinds of meetings do you have?
Sure. Love to talk about it. It's so interesting because when I started off as a coach when I was trained in 2004, I would tell lawyers as a coach and they're like, oh, you coach Little League?
Right, right.
It was interesting. And so the practice of coaching and the demand for it has grown hugely. So I'm going to give you two answers to that question, because I'm an International Coach Federation certified coach. And that's important. The International Coach Federation is a body that certifies coaches, and they have standards of practice and excellence and ethics. And we have to, when you become a certified coach of the ICF, you have to hit a certain standard of practice. So here's what most coaches will tell you. Here's the truth. We know how to hit the standard of practice, and I'm going to tell you about that. And then when we're in our coaching practice, we might play with it a bit. And I'll explain what that is. The standard of practice when you're an International Coach Federation certified coach is that you're there to help your clients do their best thinking. You're there to help them experience transformation. You're there to help them bring out their own ideas, right? And find their own path. They have the best answer for themselves within them. Okay, so it's very much an ask deep questions and help people, through your questions, help people kind of get their ahas and their breakthroughs.
Right.
This is fabulous. Great. And here's what I know. We don't know what we don't know, right? Like, it's great to draw out the best answers, but here's the really big question. What if your client doesn't have a clue, right?
Right.
What if you don't know? So when you're a coach like myself, and you're a lawyer coach, right? Which is that I work exclusively with the legal profession. I do that, right? We do that. And then also myself and my colleagues in this area, we bring a whole practice full of experience working with hundreds and hundreds of other legal professionals, and all that information and knowledge with us. And we share ideas, right? So there's almost kind of like a consultant part to it, right? There's the coaching side to it, but there's also the practical, here's something for you to consider, right? What do you think of this, right? Or you've been working on this piece, have you considered this, these kind of things. So to me, it's a dynamic dance between what's a kind of a pure coaching approach and then a practical bringing ideas to the table, so that you become kind of a business partner, if you will, a thinking partner for your clients, and you help them to get to the answer faster. So for instance, I had a conversation with a lawyer 2 weeks ago, and he was saying, I was working with this company and I had an accountability coach, but in all our meetings, she would just have me list off, the things that I was going to do and have you done them. But that was it. It was just like a big list every day. There was nothing brought to the table. And, it was interesting. And I've had other clients say, yeah, I worked with a coach and she just kept, getting me to kind of share my ideas. And she told me I was brilliant, but I didn't actually learn anything, or there was no breakthrough. And I think that's there's a dance there that has to happen between, really helping people lead with, from their own agenda, because you have to be very sensitive to where people want to go and serve those needs. But at the same time, you're a business partner, you're helping bring, lots of ideas to the table.
Yeah, you make an important point too, and I've worked with a CEO coach over the years, and this idea that they're teasing thinking out of you rather than giving you answers, I think is a really important distinction. This is, maybe like a sports coach, which you drew an analogy to. They're really trying to achieve the highest performance they can out of you by giving you the right kind of guidance. A business coach is not really giving you guidance as much as asking you the right questions that prompt you to introspect and prompt you to kind of have your own, realizations, has been my experience.
Yes.
So with that foundation of really understanding what is a coach, and how does a business or a lawyer coach or a CEO coach differ from a sports coach, I think that's a great starting point for our discussion. When you're looking at your base of clients, what do you see as some of the traits of what leadership looks like and what great leadership looks like in this crisis? And I think many of our listeners, either in their law firm situation or even their home situation, need to be leaders to their employees, to their partners, to their families. And being a leader in such an uncertain time is especially hard. Do you have some thoughts on that, or some insights that might be beneficial?
So I do have some thoughts. We're seeing all kinds of examples of leadership right now, and I'm going to intentionally not go down that path, but talk about like what's the best kind of leadership in this time. And I think one of the very important pieces, and it's just this quote that I heard, which is be very aware of the energy you bring into the room,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as leaders, whether it's the leader, a kind of a leadership role in your team or with your colleagues or in your family, I think being as leaders right now, we have to be very aware of how are we showing up, and what's the message, like what's the energy we're bringing to our discussions with our firms, with our
Right.
organizations, right? And by that I mean, you're going to be stressed like everybody else, but it's very, very important, just like for me as a coach, to be able to engage in some of my own practices for my own well-being, so that when I show up for my clients or a leader shows up for their team, and their organization, they're bringing their calm, best self to the table. They're modeling a positive frame of mind. They're bringing forward a positive energy, as opposed to kind of a shaken or disturbed energy. And it doesn't mean that you can't be transparent and come into the room and with a positive energy and talk about the fact that, what I had to meditate for about 15 minutes today to kind of get myself back down to the ground, right? So I could have my feet on the ground again. That's transparency. We're not saying that you have to pretend that you don't feel it, you don't get shaken. But when when you're going to be engaging with people, you're going to be engaging with your organization, with your team, you really got to do the personal work to bring that calm leader to and that presence to the room. It's vital. One of the things that I've been seeing happening, and it's something to be aware of, it's very important. I was in a conversation with Bina Stock the other day. She's a counselor, a lawyer, and she was a former health law lawyer in Vancouver. She's now a counselor. And we were talking about stress. And it's very interesting because as stress levels go up, judgment goes down. So the
Right.
more stressed you are, the lower your judgment. And here's the thing, you're impaired and you don't know it. It's kind of like being a drunk driver. Hey, I can drive, give me the keys. Well, I can lead this organization. I'm freaked out and stressed out, but I can lead. I'm a leader. Yeah, take the keys away, right?
Right.
Decisions you make when you're under stress are likely to be not great because you're not actually in your smart brain. You're back here in your amygdala. So back to that point, be aware, self-awareness for leaders right now. Where am I at? What's going on? What am I experiencing? What emotions am I feeling? Am I being triggered right now? Am I experiencing an amygdala hijack? All right, let me do some breathing, get myself down to ground, and reset with a little bit of a parasympathetic reset through some slow, deep breaths, and then, okay, I'm back. These are things that are really important. And when I look around at law firms today, I see some great decision making. And not to point fingers, but I can see some decision making that sure looks like it was made in a stress, at a high
Right.
level of stress. And you can probably look around and see the same sort of thing, Jack, right?
Oh, you see it everywhere. And, I think that it's so hard. And maybe this is a great segue into our next question, which is around dealing with uncertainty. And I think my response to your observation there is what can look like panicked or irrational can seem calibrated and completely rational depending on the underlying assumptions that you have around what the state of the world's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's such large error bars around what the future looks like that you can justify almost any action as being justified given the way the world's evolving. And you wrote a blog post about this very topic recently, talking about uncertainty in the COVID-19 era. And I think your blog title was titled aptly exactly that, Uncertainty in the COVID-19 Era, if anyone wants to Google it and look it up. Great article and set of observations. Can you share with us what some of your high level takeaways are for dealing with this uncertainty, and then maybe using that to calibrate your actions, and again, how you're coming across as a leader?
Okay. So that article, interestingly enough, what it was a, and I know you know this, but just for the people who are listening, it was, the lens that I looked at the uncertainty through in that blog post was grief. And there's a lot of different things going on for people right now. And one of the words what we may not be associating with it is actually one that is very apt, which is grief.
Right.
I think we think about grief as kind of the big G when the kind of the ultimately terrible thing happens and we lose a loved one, right? But grief is a word that applies to a lot of different things. And so I had a whole blog post is based on a conversation I had with Michael Kahn, another counselor. And he and I had a good conversation about grief. And I learned a lot from Michael in that conversation. And he was talking about there's the grief of events that aren't taking place. Like I was going to be going to this amazing trade show. I had a client who was going to do a great thing at a trade show, and it got canceled, and that's grief. It can be, in Michael's case, he gave the example of turning, I think, having a milestone birthday, and it was already going to be kind of a milestone birthday, the kind where you might grieve your lost youth, but it was one of those, and in those this time too, right? Not being able to celebrate as he would normally celebrate, it's a kind of grief. So there's all kinds of griefs that are emerging, small and large. And so what's important to know with that, I think, and then a client of mine and I were talking about the same thing yesterday, and she had been conversing with her friends about this kind of grief, small g grief, I'll call it. But in saying so, what's important is just to notice and to allow oneself to feel that, because there can be a sense of, well, I'm not in New York City. I haven't lost family members. So like my little pain here is like nothing. And in fact, it's okay to feel it. And there's no, what Michael said, and I think it's true, is you don't want to get into comparing your grief with someone else's. Grief is just grief.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. And it's human, right? So just notice these feelings when they come up. And just pay attention for a moment and let yourself feel it and express it. And then it'll go, it'll flow through. But this feeling that as a leader, bring it to the leadership that I'm not allowed to feel like I need to show up strong, tough, whatever it is for my people. Doesn't mean I can be feeling this stuff. No. It's when you absolutely have to allow the feelings in. You have to notice them. And there's a practice for that, right? Which is just pausing and noticing. Hey, I'm feeling something right now. What am I feeling?
Yeah.
Getting curious for just a second, just a moment. What does that look like in my body? Where do I feel that? Is it in my gut? Is it in my chest? Is it my shoulders? And just watch it for a second, and it'll start to dissolve. And take some deep breaths, and it's past, right? And that's how you deal with grief, and that's how you deal with the intense emotions that are coming up. But when you try and suppress, that's when you start to get into, again, mental impairment. And it was interesting because I was reading Harvard Business Review. They've got their negotiation blog, and and I follow that. And they frequently write about how important it is for people in negotiations to, in fact, be highly aware of their emotions and allow their emotions in. Because when people suppress emotions or try to suppress their feelings or their anger or their grief during a negotiation without recognizing it, it actually really reduces their ability to negotiate effectively. There's a complete performance drop when you try to suppress emotions. So yeah, leaders feel, and you need to feel.
I think for a lot of really important observations there, I think first the comment on grief, I think, is so insightful. And again, citing HBR here, but they had a great article a few weeks ago called "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." I think outlining some of the same concepts you've talked about, the fact that we're mourning a bunch of things that we've lost, and maybe unlike the big G grief where there's a significant loss that you outlined, we're feeling it as like micro grief all through the day. All sorts of events, big and small, are being canceled. All sorts of the natural parts of our daily rhythm and even the water cooler conversations we expect from work are gone. And yeah, there's a real sense of loss there. And I think that puts grief as a concept, I think, really puts my finger on what I've been feeling personally. And I think what so many of us are feeling. I think when you talk about essentially what is vulnerability as a leader is a really important concept too, and something I think that many leaders of all stripes, maybe especially at law firms, have this kind of like, the bravado and the brave face, and the coming across as calm, for example, maybe implies coming across as steely and resolved and not feeling emotion. Can you talk about that? What might seem like um, a, a, a dichotomy there between how do you come across as calm and measured, but also be vulnerable about the fact that, hey, I'm a bit freaked out right now, and I'm just as uncertain and just as at a state of unease as all of you are in this crazy situation that is the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah. So, that's a really interesting question. And I'm just going to point everybody who's listening to a really great, the be all end all resource on that is Brene Brown's book on leadership. And I think the title is Daring Leadership, or something along those lines.
Dare to Lead, I think.
Dare to Lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
great book.
It's not her most recent. It's the one before, just one before. It's a fabulous book. And she's got a table in there, and she talks about armored leadership, right? And then it's probably daring leadership on the other side. So what you're talking about is being armored up, right? And I think about this a lot, especially with people in law firms, because in law firms, particularly, I think it's changing, actually. I think we're seeing a lot of change on this front. But, it's so easy to come into work and to feel like you have to be armored up.
Yep.
And what does that mean to be armored up? It does mean that you're kind of suppressing emotions. You're kind of pretending that you're a little bit cut off here. You're like a little bit of a bobblehead walking around because you're not really feeling your body. You're kind of got a bit of a perfectionist thing going on. Like, there's a lot of pieces to armored leadership. So the question you're asking is, how do you take the armor off, right? And it's, and I think the first thing is to understand, coming back to that, you have to think as a leader about what do I want to be modeling here? And, what do I want to be, how do I want to be showing up? And how do I want to be showing up for the people around me? And this is personal leadership too. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's CEO leadership or top level leadership. How do you personally in your own life want to show up right now? And how can you show up with that kind of authenticity or that honesty and that openness? And again, I think it's about doing the personal work so that you can share and let people know that you have been struggling, right? And what you have been doing. But at the same time, because you've been doing that work, you've got a kind of an inner strength that's coming through. It's not well spoken. And I looked over at my bulletin board because I usually have, the armored leadership piece right up on my board. And wouldn't you know, today it's not there.
Right when you need it.
And it's been about a year since I read that book. And it's been a while since I put my head into thinking really hard about it.
Well, I just double checked the title. It is called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I think your recommendation of checking out the book. I think she's also got a Netflix special. If you don't feel like reading, I think you can watch the equivalent of a talk she gives about the book as well. So agree with you though. Fantastic resource on that side. And maybe before we leave the topic of uncertainty entirely, Allison, wanted to just talk about mindset and how you approach uncertainty. Is there a way that people can try to find certainty right now, or do you just lean into the fact that everything is uncertain and try to build some level of stoicism about that? Can you walk us through how you think about mindset in such a rapidly evolving and changing world?
Okay, so mindset is really interesting. So I've got a lot of things to talk about. So there's I can break it down to a couple of pieces because on the uncertainty versus certainty side of things, our brains are wired to get triggered by certain things. And we as human beings are heavily triggered by uncertainty, all of us. It's a major one. So yeah, in times of uncertainty, we do need to find those places where we have certainty. So I'll just quickly go there and then we'll kind of work our way out to some of the broader themes. On a really practical level, I've been doing webinars on this recently. You really want to grab onto some, and I call it BS, boundaries and structure. You can create little bits of certainty for yourself in your life, right? Using kind of creating a little bit of a structure for your day when you're on work and when you're off work. when you go for a walk with the kids at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever it is to be looking at where can you build structure, because structure gives us all certainty of a kind, and it's really relieving for the brain. And anybody who's a parent who's listening to this knows about this, right? Because we know how well kids do with structure.
Yeah.
Well, humans too, right? So it's a big piece. And then the other piece is boundaries. And that goes with structure, because you don't have boundaries, then your structure starts to crumble.
Mm-hmm.
So, having firm boundaries. And this is a place where I have seen some leadership failures with people like a leader of a team basically having his staff working all the time because, hey, you're at home, so why can't you work on the weekend or on Good Friday or
right.
So backing away from that, it's very important. If as a leader, you'd want to help people be creating some of those structures for themselves, maybe a little bit more of a structured environment at home as they're working than they would normally choose, right? So that's a way. There's small ways to give yourself some certainty.
I think that's more important than ever, even if you don't have a boss that is trying to blur those lines for you. I think that's happening to a lot of us organically due to ourselves rather than even an extrinsic force doing that.
Yeah.
I find that, for me, almost the blurry distinction between being at work and being at home that was maybe already blurry before the COVID-19 crisis only got more ambiguous now that I'm working out of my home, and what used to be personal space is now workspace and vice versa. So how does creating boundaries translate to this COVID-19 world where maybe at least in a physical sense, those boundaries are less clear than they ever were. And I think you're right, that translates to expectations that our coworkers and bosses might have, but also that we might have on ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to really change from person to person what those look like. But for an example from somebody I know who's a mom, and her husband's working too, and they've got 2 kids, and one of them's got a little bit of difficulty at school and needs extra help.
Yeah.
And so they've created a structure, right, that has, a split structure for when each of them is actually on full-time parenting. And then, on the days that she's actually able to go into an office because of the scenario there and the fact there's not a lot of people around. So 2 days a week, she's able to go into an office, and she's able to hit it hard, right? Like, get 10 hours in that day. And it feels great because she's getting a huge amount done on her 2 days in. And then she's able to be at home, kind of hitting a few things here and there, very reduced expectations for what's going on the other days. And she's getting better and better at creating boundaries and making sure that people don't try and book time with her, except for those days when she's actually, having an office day. And so it's been a really interesting experience for her watching, how her boundaries have had to get stronger because she's had less flexibility, and some of the lessons from this that she can take into her, because I think a lot of people are paying attention now to, hey, this is kind of after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, I'm starting to get the hang of this, and what can I bring into my après COVID life that this is going to help, right? Is a piece of it. The other piece I want to just talk about is lowering our expectations for ourselves, because the other thing about uncertainty is, as much as we can use structure and boundaries to create a little bit of pockets of certainty in our life, there's a lot. We're on we're surfing a wave of uncertainty, and that means that there's going to be times when we get swept up and swept down. And so we have to be kind to ourselves. There's a wonderful mantra for right now, which is, it's okay. You know what? It's okay that I didn't get all that stuff done today. That's okay. You know what? It's okay that this afternoon, I think all I can do is kick back and goof around with the kids on the carpet, or take go for a walk if you can do that. Like, it's okay, right? We have to reduce our expectations. And I'm not saying that we're throwing expectations out the window. We just got to reduce them.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think especially, so many lawyers are type A personalities that, are in lawyering because they, have high expectations of themselves and want to perform and want to be those star performers, and accepting anything less than perfection is really a foreign concept. But realizing that, hey, it's okay to be freaking out a little bit. It's okay to feel tired at noon, like those things that I think we're all coping with on a daily basis. And maybe building on that observation and some of the translating into tactics and some concrete takeaways for our listeners, Allison. I'm sure, in working with lawyers, you see, high levels of stress and anxiety and depression. And I'm sure in the COVID-19 crisis, it's not doing anything to help what is already a profession that sees higher than average rates of all of those afflictions. What do you have in terms of strategies that people can deploy against the stress and anxiety and depression they might be coping with in this crisis?
Stress, anxiety, and depression. And frankly, like a lot of my clients, they're having a hard time. They're stressed, but they're not, like, the ones who are depressed are seeing counselors and are taking medication.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, I spent
Well, why don't I ask you a different question, Allison, which is, what are you seeing from your clients, and what kinds of strategies are you helping them deploy? And you can, that's maybe a more manageable question.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of different things are going on right now for my clients.
Oh, and sorry, I'll take another run at that question, just so it sounds a bit more natural. So Allison, I'm curious what you're seeing from your clients in terms of, elevated states of maybe anxiety or stress. What are you hearing from them now that we're 4 or 5 weeks into the real meat of this crisis? And what kinds of strategies are you helping them deploy to manage those?
So there's a whole range of things that are going on right now. So on one end of the spectrum, we have economic stress from having a reduced salary, or job stress from maybe having a job transition forced on you.
Yeah.
Kind of to people who maybe don't have as much work. They're not used to having a plate that's quite so free of work. Like,
right. What's this?
Never experienced
this feeling of not being completely slammed?
Yeah. And then we've got the people who are actually quite slammed.
Right.
And there's a lot going on. And the ones who are quite slammed with kids, and there's a lot going on. And the ones, there's a whole kind of trajectory of things that are happening for people right now. What really helps, or what are the sort of things that we're talking about? Really, it's great to have a little bit of a game plan. Again, having a bit of making decisions about, I think one of the things that's really, really valuable right now for people in any of those situations is to be thinking about, how do I want to show up in this? Like, who do I want to be? Like, asking some of those questions, right? Rather than just surviving, I like to kind of shift it a little bit. What's the opportunity here? Like, how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be in this? And where's the opportunity? And opportunity can look like a lot of things, but it comes back to that question you asked me right at the beginning. What am I thinking about? I'm thinking about, how can I be helping?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of my clients are also thinking about that. How can I be helping? What can I be doing? And I've got some of my clients are actually taking the opportunity to do a little work on their values and doing some, value exercises to take some time at this time to reflect on what are some of my core values. And we're working on exercises like that to kind of bring those values up into the foreground, so they're more kind of a part of life. And then how am I acting on those in this circumstance? It's a great time to kind of be thinking about your strengths and what are you really good at, and those tie in with your values and how can I bring those forward, right? It's great to kind of match that with a little bit for a plan for what am I doing this week, right? What are the most important things I want to make happen this week? Given that I have reduced expectations, there's not as much that I can be doing. What's going to help? A plan, it sounds simple, but like having a game plan is amazing, because again, it gives you that certainty. So I'm thinking about a young dad I know who basically is carrying the burden of parenting for various reasons, his toddler right now on his own. He's got an incredibly busy practice. He's slammed with work. He's trying to do both. It's extremely hard. What really helps him? Well, on the days where his parents take the toddler for a brief period, so he gets some time. What helps him is having a game plan for those days. He wasn't super organized, but now he's got his list. He knows what he's doing. And so he's able to focus. So if anything that helps give you focus right now is really, because the uncertainty makes us really super unfocused. So pockets of focus, hugely, hugely valuable. Understanding some of your core values and strengths, and leveraging those, and making sure that you're kind of, how am I out there and helping? Where are the opportunities for me right now, and getting clear on that, and figuring out how you're going to bring them in. That stuff is really, really helpful. I can't say enough for having a game plan for
Yeah.
what you want to, how you want to be moving through the weeks, and what you want to be doing right now.
And I think something I've heard on a few different fronts in terms of coping tools is having a plan, but also that plan should be shorter term than average. Like you want to plan for tonight, you want to plan for the weekend. And if you're kind of looking forward to those short-term things and feel solid about the short term, that helps you manage the long term. But you kind of take it on a day by day, week by week basis. And you're not saying, here's my plan for the next year.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Like it's the 24-hour plan. And it's funny, the other piece of having a plan like that, there's another piece that goes hand in hand with it, was for us to strengthen our noticing, our personal noticing ability. Just checking in with yourself and like kind of noticing, like where am I at emotionally right now?
Yeah.
Like, how am I feeling? And what's my energy level? I did that the other day, and I realized, wow, I have been going full tilt since January. I'm actually exhausted. So I'm having a COVID staycation in May for 3 days, right? Because I realized, you know what? Too much screen time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I really need to unwind, and I got to do it at home. So I'll do it at home.
Yeah. I coincidentally just at the town hall for Clio, which is our weekly virtual gathering now for the whole company. One of the things I did was encourage everyone to take their vacation time, which a lot of people are maybe even inadvertently not taking today, or holding out for getting on the other side of the pandemic and the shutdown and being able to go somewhere nice. And my position was, we're going to be in this for a while, and your expectations of what vacation is going to look like should be very much along the lines of a staycation. But take those breaks, and take the break from screen time, and disconnect from email.
A couple more things about that. If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And get out in nature. Like,
yes.
Oh my goodness. Even if nature is like, a lone tree on the street, whatever it is for you, but get outside, like breathe the air outside. It's huge.
So much peer-reviewed research that shows that getting out in nature has a good impact on your mental health too. That it's a really proven fact that I think people maybe appreciate intrinsically, but don't know just how impactful it is. And it's one of the easiest things you can do to start building great mental health.
And it's so funny, right? Because there are two things, right? It's like, go outside and, oh my goodness, take some deep breaths.
Yeah. Yep.
But on I just want to talk for a moment about stress. The other thing I want to say to people is, if you really do notice, I've been very, very stressed. I'm very, very anxious. This is not, like, to an unusual degree. It's becoming very difficult. I can see that it's impairing me. It's making it hard for me with my family. One of the great things right now is you can access counseling. So I'm a coach, and coaching is great for a lot of things, and so is counseling. And I know like so many great counselors out there who are now doing Zoom consultations. I mean, literally counseling is just an email away for you. So I would say to anybody who is finding themselves experiencing an unusual degree of depression, it's starting to become a problem. It's difficult. Reach out to a counselor. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know where to find one, the lawyer's assistance programs can probably guide you. Or if you've got an employee assistance program, that can probably, an EAP, I think it is.
Yep.
They can help you, connect you, but there's lots of great resources there. And definitely the only mistake you can make is to not reach out for help.
That's great and very important advice. And everyone should remember, there's always help out there looking to give help when it's needed. And there's always somebody to call. Allison, this has been a hugely useful conversation, full of lots of practical advice. I wanted to wrap up, if you might be able to share your main message to others, speaking to them either as legal professionals or simply as human beings.
There's so much that's important right now, but one of the metaphors I've been using a lot in my work is just imagine for yourself that you're on a really great surfboard on the ocean, and the ocean is the uncertainty, and the board is those things that really help you show up every day. So let's talk about what that board is. We've talked about it a little bit. It's the BS, right? Setting your boundaries and your structure, right? So that you've got something that's giving you a little bit of certainty.
Yeah.
It's your self-care. So it's checking in with yourself and noticing, wow, I'm stressed out. Wow, I'm angry. Actually, I feel okay right now, whatever it is. But, kind of a daily or a couple times daily check-in, not a bad thing to do. And when you're stressing out, do a couple of things that are going to help you. Get outside. Take a moment and breathe. Maybe do a little yoga or some exercise in your apartment, whatever it is, right? But that's part of that board that supports you as well, as is your community and reaching out to people. And I know there's a lot of that going on right now, which is great. So keep doing that, right? That's part of also the board that will keep you afloat. And the other piece is that having your eye on your horizon. Where are you going, right? And that might be your 24-hour plan, like we talked about, right? Or it might be the sense of who and how you want to be showing up at this time. So, imagine yourself on that board. Your board is going to be distinct to you. Mine is distinct to me, but have your surfboard and put attention into what's going to support you in staying out of the waves. And when you get flipped off it and you land in the water, that's okay. Splash around a little bit, do what you need to, get back on the board.
That's a really powerful metaphor, and I think a great takeaway for us today. Thanks so much for joining us, Allison. Look forward to talking to you again, and stay healthy out there.
Oh, thank you. You too, Jack.
Thanks for joining us on Daily Matters today, a podcast from Clio. Rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Daily Matters is produced by Andrew Booth, Sam Rosenthal, and Derek Bolin, and hosted by yours truly, Jack Newton. Thanks also to Clio, the world's leading cloud-based legal technology provider, for supporting this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Clio, please visit clio.com.